Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week. If you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. In today's tutorial, we're making a modern crop tee. This make is a take on a 90s-ish baby tee, but made for today. We've got cute cap sleeves, a crossover band, and a scoop neck that's begging to be paired with your favorite summer necklace. Speaking of, if you're looking for the perfect fit to pair with an accessory or two, try making it since you're at the best place to start. We have hundreds of crochet tutorials and patterns with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 3 yarn will work, but I used a total of 115 grams of yarn, or 400 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 4mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us your star sign. I am a Scorpio. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 5 stitches for this project, and it'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet, and Trinity Stitch. This tutorial is made for size small. You can adjust it for your size and explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 3 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 4mm hook, and we are all going to start this off the same because we're starting with the point of our cup. So for every size, we're all going to start with a chain 1. Once we have our chain 1, block off that last chain, then do a chain 2. That chain 2 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into that first chain that we made, an increase of 3 half doubles. So yarn over and bring your hook down into that first chain with 1 half double crochet, into that same first chain with a second half double crochet, and into that same first chain with a third half double crochet. So everyone so far should have a total of 3 stitches at the end of our row 1. From here, we're all going to chain 1 and flip our work. Now our row 2, we're going to get started with our Trinity Stitch. Now for the first Trinity Stitch of every row, it's going to be done a different way than the rest of our Trinity Stitches. So getting that first Trinity Stitch started, we're all going to start with a single crochet into that first stitch from our previous row. Then what we're going to do from here is pull up a total of 4 loops. So start by inserting your hook into that same stitch that our single crochet is into, pull up a loop for 2. Into that next stitch, insert, pull up a loop for 3, then into that next stitch, which should be the last from our previous row, pull up a loop for 4, then yarn over, pull through all 4. Now for this row 2, we are going to do our first Trinity Stitch plus an increase. So right after we pull through all 4, into that same last stitch, so it will be occupied, we're going to do an increase. And all that's going to be is 1 single, 1 half double, and 1 double crochet. So into that same last stitch, start with 1 single, into that same last stitch, 1 half double, same last stitch with 1 double crochet, and this increase end is going to be the top of our cup, so I do like to insert my stitch marker into the top of that. And now that our first 2 rows are completed, we should have a total of 5 stitches. Now for every odd number row, we are not going to be doing any increases or decreases, so we're going to chain 1 and flip, and we're going to start with our first Trinity Stitch. Now how we're going to do our first Trinity Stitch is going to be pretty much the same way that we did the previous one, but without the increase. So into that first stitch from our previous row, start with a single. Into that same stitch our single crochet is worked into, insert, pull up a loop for 2. We still need to pull up 4 loops, so into that following stitch, pull up a loop for 3, following stitch, pull up a loop for 4, then yarn over, pull through all 4. Then to complete our first Trinity Stitch, we are going to chain 1. Now we should all have 2 stitches left. Now into that last stitch, we're all going to do our last Trinity stitch. So how that's going to work is start by inserting your hook into the last stitch that our previous Trinity stitch was worked into. So into that occupied stitch, pull up a loop for 2. Into that following stitch, which is our second to last, insert, pull up a loop for 3. Into that last stitch as well, insert, pull up a loop for 4. When we have these 4 loops, yarn over, pull through all 4, and since this is the last Trinity stitch of the row and we are not doing an increase, we're going to simply close off the row with 1 single crochet into that last stitch. Now our row 3 is complete and we should all still have a total of 5 stitches. Now we're going to get started on our row 4, so chain 3 and flip. So now that we did a chain 3 and flip, we are going to be increasing into each of our even number rows, but into every other even number row we're going to be increasing on both ends. So as a really quick tip, we did an increase at the end of our row 2. Now that we're at our row 4, we're going to increase on both ends now. So to get this row started off with our increase, after we did our chain 3, all into that first stitch, insert with 1 double, 1 half double, and 1 single crochet all into that first stitch. Then we're going to do our first Trinity stitch. So just like how we've gotten started on all the other rows, into that same stitch that our single crochets in, but it's also the same stitch that he increases in, we're going to insert, pull through. Next stitch, pull through. Stitch right after that, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 4, and do a chain up of 1 to complete this Trinity stitch. Now we should all have 2 stitches left, so we are going to be doing our Trinity stitch increase at the end of our row as well, which is going to be done the same way as our previous row. So we're going to insert our hook into that last stitch that our previous Trinity stitch is worked into, pull up a loop, next stitch, pull up a loop, next stitch, pull up a loop for a total of 4 loops, then yarn over, pull through 4. To do our increase again, 1 single, 1 half double, 1 double all into that last stitch. So insert with a single, 1 half double, and 1 double crochet. And now our row 4 is complete, and now we should all have a total of 9 stitches at the end of our row 4. Now I am going to be inserting a stitch marker into the beginning and the end of this row just so I know that I increased into both ends. But once we have that, chain 1 and flip. So like I said, every odd number row is not going to have any increases or decreases. So just to get this row started, we're going to chain 1. We're going to start with our first Trinity stitch, which is always going to start with a single crochet. Then again, we need to pull up 4 loops, so into that same stitch our single crochet is in, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4, then chain 1 to complete our first Trinity stitch. Then to do the next Trinity stitch, we're all going to insert our hook into that last stitch that our previous Trinity stitch was worked into. So insert, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through for 4 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through 4, chain 1, and let's just do this entire row together. We're going to be doing that Trinity stitch again. So into that last stitch that our previous Trinity stitch was worked into, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4, chain 1, and now we should all have 2 stitches left. The last Trinity stitch is going to be done pretty much the same way, but close off with a single crochet. So into the last stitch our previous Trinity stitch is worked into, pull through. Into that second to last stitch, pull through, last stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4, and instead of closing off the row with a chain 1, since this is the last one, completed with 1 single crochet into that last stitch. Now at the end of our row 5, we should all have a total of 9 stitches. Now let's get started on our row 6, so chain 1 and flip. Now getting started on our row 6, since it's an even number row, we are going to end the row with an increase, but we are not going to start this row off with an increase because our previous even number row started with one. So what we're going to do is single crochet into that first stitch and do our first Trinity stitch. Then continue on with our normal Trinity stitches until we all have 2 stitches left. Now that we're at the end of our row 6, we're all going to close off the row with a Trinity stitch increase. So into that last stitch our previous Trinity stitch is worked into, second to last stitch in the row, last stitch in the row for 4 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through 4. Then all into that last stitch, a single, a half double, and a double crochet. And like I said, I do like to insert my stitch markers into the edges that I increased into. Now we should all have a total of 6 rows completed. At the end of our row 6, we should all have a total of 11 stitches. Now let's just get the 3 following rows completed because it is going to be a 4-row repeat. This is the first row in our 4-row repeat. So chain 1, flip our work. Every odd number row isn't going to have any increases or decreases. So do our Trinity stitches all the way down. We should end with the same amount of stitches as our previous row, so 11 for our row 7. Our row 7 is complete. Now let's get started on our row 8, so chain 3 and flip. Now we're going to start off our row 8 with an increase, so starting into that first stitch with 1 double, 1 half double, and 1 single crochet. That is the increase portion. Now we're going to do our first Trinity stitch, so into that same stitch that our increase was into, pull through, next pull through, next pull through, yarn over, pull through 4, chain 1, and continue on with our Trinity stitch till we have 2 stitches left. We're at the end of our row 8. Now we're going to close it off with an increase. So into that last stitch our previous Trinity stitch is worked into, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4. Then for the increase, all into that last stitch, 1 single, 1 half double, and 1 double crochet. And since we did increase into both ends, I will be inserting a stitch marker into both of the ends. And now that our row 8 is complete, chain 1, flip our work, and do our Trinity stitch all the way down. So we are back and our first 9 rows are completed. Now from here it is going to be a repeat of our 4 previous rows until we now have a portion that can reach from mid-chest, making sure that this tail end is staying at mid-chest, all the way over to where a bra or a tank top strap would lay, making sure that we end right after an even number row. So along the top, then we can work straight into the shoulder portion from there. We are back and the increased portion of our cup is completed. And please note, my stitch markers aren't into place here, but yours should be, so it's easier to do the bottom band. I have a total of 14 rows. My width is roughly 4 inches or 10 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to make an even number chain that reaches the top of our shoulder. Now I already went ahead and measured mine out. I need roughly 6.5 inches or 17 centimeters, so that's going to be a chain 30 for me. But how we're going to measure it is making sure that the edge with the fewer increases stays roughly at under boob, so roughly where an underwire would sit, and the tail end stays at mid-chest. But once we have our chain completed, what we're going to do is just the following row. Since the following row is an odd number row, remember we're not doing any increases or decreases into those. So chain 1, flip our work after we have our chain, and then make our way down with our Trinity stitches, and then I'll meet you back. We are back and our first shoulder row is complete. From here, we're going to continue on with our Trinity stitch rows, still remembering that we're increasing at the beginning of every other even number row, so the following row may be a little bit different for everyone, until we now have a portion that can reach from mid-chest all the way over to the corner of our underarm. So just to talk you guys through the following row, I am going to be increasing at the beginning of my following row. So I'm going to chain 3, flip my work. Started off with our first Trinity stitch increase, then do our Trinity stitch all the way up. The top of our shoulder portion needs to be blunt, so we won't have any increases or decreases into that end. But for those of you that don't need to increase, just chain 1, flip your work, and do your Trinity stitch all the way down. Continue to get the shoulder portion completed. Then I'll meet you back right after an odd number row or along the bottom. We are back and our shoulder portion is complete. Now I have a total of 19 rows. This width is roughly 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Now we're all going to get started on our underarm portion. So first things first, put this piece up to ourselves, making sure that the tail end is still staying at mid-chest. The blunter end is still staying right where our underwire would be. Now from here, we're all going to insert our stitch marker into any stitch that is an even number that is in multiples of 3 that's nearest to the corner of our underarm. So I'm going to insert my stitch marker into the 24th stitch from the top. That's roughly 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Now from here, we're all going to do our underarm portion together. So for the following row, if you guys need to start your following row off with an increase, go ahead and do that. I need to do mine, so I'm going to chain 3, flip my work, do my first Trinity stitch, but if you guys don't have to, that's completely fine as well. Just do your row sequence and make your way all the way up until we have 4 stitches left before our stitch marker. So we've made our way down to the first underarm row, leaving the last 4 stitches right before stitch marker. Now we're going to do our Trinity Stitch decrease. So what we're going to do from here is get started on our falling Trinity Stitch the same way as all of our other ones. So inserting our hook into that same last stitch that our previous Trinity Stitch is worked into, pull through. Into that next stitch, pull through for 3 loops. Into that next stitch, pull through for 4 loops. We should have 2 stitches left over. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through all 4. Once we have just 1 loop left on our hook, we're just going to do a decrease of 2 half double crochets into the last 2 stitches. So insert your hook into that second to last stitch, pull through, also into that last stitch, yarn over, pull through for 3 loops on our hook, then yarn over and pull through all 3. And that is how we do our decrease. Our following row isn't going to have any increases or decreases, so chain 1, flip our work, and make our way all the way down. We are back and we have just completed our first 2 underarm rows. From here, it's just going to be a repeat of those 2 previous rows until we have a portion that can stretch over from mid-chest all the way over to mid-underarm. Now we do still want to make sure that we're increasing at the beginning of every other even numbered row, so just maintain that same increase that we've been doing at the beginning of the row, and also every odd number row still will not have any increases or decreases. So just to talk you guys through the following row, my last even number row, which is this one right here, did start with an increase, so my following one will not start with an increase, but long story short, do your Trinity Stitch all the way up, leaving the last 4 stitches. When we have 4 stitches left, we're going to do the same decrease that we just did here. Chain 1, flip our work, do the following row, which is just a Trinity Stitch all the way down. But once we have that completed, I will meet you guys back when we have an odd number of underarm rows, not counting the entire piece, and then I will meet you guys back. So we are back. We have just completed the underarm portion. Now I have a total of 5 underarm rows, giving me a total of 24 rows for my piece. And the width that I have is roughly 7 inches or 18 centimeters. Once we have one side completed, we're going to make a second one that is completely identical. Then once we have both completed, we can get started on the back panel. So getting started on the back panel, we're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches that we have for our last underarm row. For me, that's 29. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to get started on our first Trinity Stitch. So block off that last chain, do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, insert, starting with just 1 single crochet. Then we're going to complete our first Trinity Stitch the same way that we've been doing this entire time. Yarn over, pull through 4, chain 1, and continue to do our Trinity Stitch, making our way all the way down until we all have 2 chains left. So we've made our way down with 2 chains left. Now we're going to do our increase the same way that we did for the front panel. So inserting our hook into the last stitch from our previous Trinity Stitch, into that next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4, then into that same last stitch, 1 single, 1 half double, and 1 double crochet. And the following row will not have any increases or decreases, so simply chain 1, flip our work, and then do our Trinity Stitch all the way down. Now for the back panel's underarm portion, we aren't going to be doing any increases along the bottom of our piece. So at the end of our row 2, chain 1, flip our work, make our way up, and make sure we end every odd number row with an increase. We're going to continue to repeat those 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of front panel underarm rows, and once we do, I'll meet you guys back so we can get started on the width of the back panel. We are back. I have just completed the back panel's underarm portion. Now what we're going to do from here is make a chain for the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started on our front panel's underarm portion. So for those of you that have my numbers, for the front panel, I inserted my stitch marker into the 24th stitch. So here, I'm going to be making a chain of 24. Now from here, we're all going to be doing Trinity Stitch rows with no increases and no decreases along the top or the bottom. Everything is going to be the same amount of stitches all the way across, until we have roughly the same width from our first shoulder row all the way over to our last shoulder row. Once we have that, I will meet you guys back along the bottom so we can finish up with our underarm together from there. We are back. We have just completed the width of our back panel. Now I have a total of 40 rows. My width is roughly 10 inches or 25 centimeters unstretched. Now what we're going to do from here is our underarm, and it's going to be done pretty much the same way as the front panel's underarm, but along the bottom, we still are not doing any increases. So just to get this one started, we are going to need to insert our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that led up to the top of our shoulders. So since I made a chain of 24 on this side from the top, I'm going to insert my stitch marker into the 24th stitch. Then from here, since we're along the bottom, Trinity Stitch all the way up, leaving 4 stitches right before our stitch marker. So we've made our way down to the first underarm row. We have left the last 4 stitches. Now we're going to do the same decrease that we did for the front panel. So just to get this started, we're all going to start by inserting our hook into that last stitch that our previous Trinity stitches worked into. Pull through, into that next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, and we should have 2 stitches left right before our stitch marker. Then yarn over, pull through 4, then a decrease of 2 half doubles. So yarn over, into that second to last stitch, pull through, also into that last stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4. And now our first underarm row is complete. Then our following row isn't going to have any increases or decreases, so chain 1, flip our work, and do our Trinity stitch all the way down, and just continue to repeat those 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of underarm rows as the first underarm or the same amount of underarm rows as the front panel. When we have that, do a chain up of 1 and cut. We are back and the entirety of my back panel is complete. I have a total of 45 rows. My width is roughly 11 inches or 26 centimeters. Now we're going to seam the front to the back, starting with our sides. So go ahead and do a chain up of 1 and cut, then place one of our front panels on top of our back panel. So we are back. We have placed our front panel on top of our back panel. Now we're ready to seam up the sides. So first things first, insert your hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel and insert your yarn onto your hook. We're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 just to secure. Then we're going to do a single crochet row working in through both panels. So just find that next stitch into the front panel, insert, next stitch into the back panel, insert, and just single crochet around everything. Again, next stitch into the front panel, insert, next stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet, and continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So we are back. We have just finished up seaming the sides. Now we're going to seam the shoulder. So first things first, make sure that our work is still flipped wrong side out, meaning the seam that we did for the sides is still along the outside. Then insert your hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And we are going to do another single crochet seam, but now since we don't have any stitches to work into, we're going to be working into the side rows. Start by finding that first side row within the front panel and insert your hook. Find that next side row within the back panel, insert your hook in through there, and single crochet. We're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side row, so finding our following side row, find that top loop, following side row within the back panel, find that top loop, and insert with a single, and that's it. Continue doing this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and repeat on the other side. So now that everything is all seamed together, we're ready to get started on our sleeve. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out now, meaning all of the seams that we just did are along the inside. Then we're going to insert our hook into the side row that's nearest to our side seam within the armhole. Now we're going to do a single crochet row. So working into each of our side rows, we are going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, starting with 2 single crochets. We're going to pull our working yarn through and start with a chain 1. And into our first side row right here, we're going to find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets. So there's 1 single crochet into that same top loop with a second single crochet. Now into my next side row, which this is mine right here, I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1 single crochet. And that's it. We're going to continue to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. Then once we reach the body portion, 1 single crochet into every stitch until we're worked into the stitch right before our shoulder seam. So we've made our way all the way up until we have reached our shoulder seam. What we're all going to do is insert our stitch marker into that last stitch, then do the same thing, working our way down the armhole again. But into that first stitch on the other side of our shoulder seam, we're going to insert with a single crochet and insert your stitch marker into that stitch so we know where our 2 middle stitches are. From here, continue with 1 single crochet into every stitch. When we reach the side rows, alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, starting with 2. We should have the same amount of stitches on both sides of our armhole, then slip stitch into that chain space, and I'll meet you back. So our single crochet row is complete. Now what we're going to do from here is all make a chain 3, since we would like for this to be a small cap sleeve. So right after we slip stitch into that chain space, we're all going to do chain 1, chain 2. Now that we have our chain, we're going to do our Trinity Stitch back, but this one is going to be done pretty much the same way as the first increased Trinity Stitch that we did for the body. So what we're going to do from here is block off that last chain and do a chain 1. We're going to start it off with our first Trinity Stitch. So inserting our hook into that second chain from our hook with just 1 single crochet. Then we're going to pull up 4 loops. Into that same chain that our single crochet is in, pull through, into that following chain, insert, pull through, then into that last chain, insert, pull through for 4 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 4. Then to do our increase, a single, half double, double, all into that last stitch. So here is a single, here is a half double, then into that same last stitch with a double crochet. And for everyone, at the end of our row 1, we should have a total of 5 stitches, and we're going to connect it into the base. So how we're going to connect it into the base is connecting any odd number row. We're going to count 1 and count 2. Into that second stitch into the base, we're going to insert with a slip stitch to connect that row 1. Now that slip stitch into the base doesn't actually count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, flip our work, and now do our Trinity Stitch back, but since it's an even number row, no increases and no decreases. So start with a single crochet. We're all at the end of our row 2. We should all still have 5 stitches. Now let's do our following increase row, which is a odd number row. So chain 1, flip our work, do our same Trinity stitches till we have 2 stitches left. Now this is going to be the same increase that we've been doing this entire time. So now that we have 2 stitches left, start off our last Trinity Stitch per usual. Once we just pulled through all 4, a single, half double, double, all into that last stitch. And now at the end of our row 3, we should have a total of 7 stitches. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So the same way that we did our previous row, we're going to count up 1, count up 2, slip stitch into that second stitch into the base. That slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch. Then slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work, then do a non-increased Trinity Stitch row to reach the end. From here, we're just going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we're worked up into our first stitch marker stitch, and then I will meet you back. So we are back. We've made our way all the way up with the increased side of our sleeve. Now we're going to do pretty much the same thing that we did here, but decreases. So what we're all going to do from here is decrease now at the beginning of every even number row. So for those of you that are like me that ended along the base, we're going to slip stitch it into that next available stitch into the base and flip our work. Then we'll get started on our decrease together. But for those of you that ended along the edge, you're going to do your following row, which is a Trinity Stitch row with no increases and no decreases. Connect it into the base the same way that we normally do. And then when everyone is along the base, I'll show you how we're going to do our decrease. So we are back along the base. We have slip stitched into the base the same way that we normally would and have worked our way up to the following row by slip stitching into that next available stitch into the base as well. Now we're going to start this row off with a decrease of 3 half double crochets. So how that's going to work is yarn over. Into that first stitch from our previous row, not into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to yarn over and insert, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through for a total of 5 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 5. And now that our decrease is completed, we're now going to get started on our first Trinity Stitch. So that Trinity Stitch is going to be done per usual. The last stitch in our decrease of 3 half double crochets is basically going to act as the first single crochet when we normally get started with our Trinity Stitch. So just to do this one, we're all going to insert our hook into the last stitch that the decrease was worked into, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through for a total of 4 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 4, and chain 1. Continue on with our normal Trinity stitches, making our way all the way down, closing off the row with a single crochet because remember it still needs to be blend. From here, the following row will have no increases and no decreases, so just continue to repeat those two previous rows, making our way all the way down. When we don't have any more stitches left, I'll meet you back to seam it together. So we are back. We have just completed the decrease side of our sleeve. Now from here, we're going to seam it up. But this seam is actually going to be done the same way as our side, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it. We're all going to make sure that our work is flipped wrong side out. Then we're going to do the same single crochet seam that we did for the sides. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up 1 and cut, then repeat everything we did here on the other side. So getting started on our bottom band, insert your hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam along the bottom. So working our way across the back panel first, all we're going to do is just alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So just to do the first few stitches, start by finding our first side row. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert with 1 single crochet. Into my next side row, there is 2 single crochets. So there's 1, there's 2. Again, my next side row, insert with 1. Next side row, insert with 2. And I'll meet you back once we reach our other side seam so we can work into the front panel together. So we've just completed single crocheting across the entirety of the back panel. Now we're going to single crochet across the bottom of the front. So as you guys can see, we all should have left our stitch markers into place right into the rows where we did our increases. So what we're going to do is put 2 single crochets into each of our stitch marker side rows and then 1 single crochet into every side row in between. So getting that started, my first side row, which is this one right here, is an increase row. So my stitch markers there, I'm going to insert into there with 2 single crochets. But if yours is not an increase row, that's completely fine as well. Just put 1 single crochet into every side row until you reach your first stitch marker stitch. So since mine is here, I'm going to take it out. I'm going to insert my hook in through that top loop with 2 single crochets. There's 1, there's 2. Then in between our stitch marker side rows, there should be 1, 2, 3 side rows. So to that next side row, there's 1. Next side row, there's 2. Next side row, there is 3, and we should be at our following stitch marker stitch. So I'm going to take this out and then insert into that top loop with 2 single crochets. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way down until we're worked into our last side row, and then I'll meet you guys back right at the middle. So I've just made my way across one of my front panels. Now we're at the middle. Now I did tie my 2 tail ends together nice and snug. That's going to be how this is connected, but also with our single crochet row as well. So in between our 2 cups, we're going to chain 1 and make sure we're inserting a stitch marker into that chain 1 just so we know where the middle is. Then from here, we're going to continue with 1 single crochet into every side row, 1 single crochet into every side stitch marker side row, all the way down. Once we don't have any more stitches left, slip stitch into that chain space. Now just as a really quick tip, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch. So once when it's completed, try your piece on, making sure that it's not too snug. If it is, reuse some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, reduce some stitches with a tighter grip. So now that our single crochet row is complete, we're ready to get started on the crisscross portion of our band. So first things first, let's all make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, and we're looking at the front panel. What we're all going to do is insert our hook into the front loop of any stitch for the width that we'd like for the bottom band to be, making sure that our hook is on the right side. This is going to be the same for everyone. So I would like for my bottom band to be roughly 3 inches or 8 centimeters. So counting from my stitch marker stitch, including that stitch marker stitch, I counted out a total of 12 stitches and inserted my hook into that front loop. And now that our hook is in through that front loop only, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And from here, working towards our middle stitch marker stitch, we're going to be putting 1 front loop single crochet into every stitch, including into that stitch marker. So counting with that first stitch that our chain 1 is in, we're going to insert into that front loop again with 1 single crochet. Into that next stitch's front loop with another single crochet. So now that we've put 1 front loop single crochet into every stitch, we're going to need to connect it into the base, and the base is going to be all the stitches to the left of our stitch mark. So connecting it into the base, we are going to need to slip stitch it into the front loops just to make sure that we're leaving stitches so that we can seam it up later. So just finding that next available stitch into the base, which is the first stitch on the other side of our stitch marker, insert into that front loop, making sure the work is flipped right side out, right side up, and insert into that front loop only with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Now we do need to work our way up to the following row, so slip stitch into that next stitch's front loop, yarn over, pull through everything, still doesn't count as a stitch, and flip our work. And from here, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So just finding that last stitch from our previous row, not working into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert into that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us, yarn over, and gently pull through everything. Again, next stitch is back loop, yarn over, and gently pull through everything. And we want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly, otherwise the falling rows will be too tight to work into. But just continue to do this to reach the end of the row. When we do reach the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work. Put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. We're now at the end of our row 3. Now we're just going to connect it into the base the same way that we did for the previous rows. So slip stitching into that next available stitch's front loop into the base, yarn over, pull through everything, then slip stitch into that next stitch's front loop. None of those slip stitches into the base count as a stitch, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. From here, continue to repeat our 2 previous rows with no increases and no decreases, making our way all the way around. Once we're worked into our last available stitch, right before our bottom band, I'll meet you guys back. We have just worked into the last available stitch right before the beginning of our bottom band. Now from here, we're just going to continue on with our back loop slip stitch rows, working into the back loops of the available stitches that we have underneath the front of our bottom band. So just continue to repeat these 2 previous rows, still working into these back loop stitches that we have until we reach our stitch marker, but we do want to make the seam easier for us. So just continue on with these rows until we reach our stitch marker stitch, making sure that we meet back at the base. Now for some of us, if we're worked into our stitch marker stitch, we may end along the base, or we may reach the base 1 stitch right before. Just make sure that we are either into the stitch before or into that stitch marker stitch, and then I'll meet you back to seam it all up. So we are back. We've just made our way all the way over to our stitch marker stitch, making sure that we all ended along the base. Now from here, we're going to flip our work wrong side out to seam it all up together. So now that our work is flipped wrong side out, we're going to connect the end of our bottom band to the available stitches that we have along the bottom of our piece, because remember, we connected it into the front loops only. So since we all should have ended along the base, we're just going to insert our hook into that next available stitch, into the bottom band, and also into that next available stitch into the base. The base is going to be just the next available stitch. So it could be your stitch marker stitch if you're not worked into there, or into the stitch right after. But either way, I'm going to take mine out because I don't need it anymore. But just find that next available stitch. And then once we have all 3 loops, we're going to single crochet around everything. Again, next stitch into the front panel, next stitch into the bottom of our piece, and single crochet. And we're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left, then do a chain up of 1 and cut. So we are back. We have just completed seaming up our bottom band. Now from here, we're just going to finish up with the collar. So first things first, make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to do a single crochet row along the entirety of our neckline. So just to talk you guys through it, because it's going to be pretty simple, we are going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, 1 single crochet into every stitch. We are still going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row along the front panel as well, but just continue making your way all the way around with that single crochet row. Then slip stitch into that chain space, and I'll meet you back. So we just made our way all the way around with our single crochet row. Now from here, we're going to do another slip stitch band, pretty much the same way that we did the bottom one. So what we're going to do, right after we slip stitch into that chain space, is make a chain the length that we'd like for the collar to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making chain 6. Then from here, just do back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases, same way we did the bottom band, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you guys back to seam it all up. We are back, and we have made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. Now from here, we're going to seam it together, and this seam is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, so let's make sure the work is flipped right side out, right side up. We're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, yarn over, and pull through everything. Then start by finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert in through that front loop only. Next stitch into the back panel, insert in through that back loop only. Then yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. Now this seam should look like another back loop slip stitch row, so let's do this again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop. Yarn over and pull through everything, and that's it. Continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left, then do a chain up of 1 and cut. We are back. We have just seamed up the entirety of our collar, and we are all done. Last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. There you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!